Hello, friends. Today I'm going to recap verse 1 to verse 8. The separate, detailed understanding of them has already been shared. This is the understanding which has been given by Paramahansa Yogananda in his book on Bhagavad Gita's verses. Today I'm going to briefly recap verse 1 to verse 8. Verse 1 is about Dhritarashtra asking Sanjay. Dhritarashtra is representing the blind sense mind. In this manner, Yoganandaji has beautifully gone over what every character represents. And like Dhritarashtra, the blind sense mind, asks Sanjay, which represents impartial introspection in this verse, that in the battle which was taking place in the holy field of Kurukshetra, which is representing the bodily field of activity, all the actions that we do, all the thoughts that we think, it is representing that. So the blind sense mind asks the introspection that in this battlefield, what happened? What happened in this battle today? So it's interesting that it's in the past, like the battle has already taken place, and the sense mind wants to know who was victorious. So, what is this battle between? It is the battle between the forces of the soul and the forces of the ego. And as we go on into the next verses, we find that which are these forces which are facing each other. So, we actually realize that the Pandavas are representing the good qualities within us who are there to support us. And the Kaurava forces are the blind sense tendencies or the sense mind, or when we are oriented towards the body rather than being oriented towards the soul. So, in this verse also, if we look at the detailed part of it, Yoganandaji has gone over that if soul was ruling a particular uh, like uh, state, he calls, like for example the eyes, if the soul is ruling the eyes, one would see good in the world, and if ego is ruling the eyes, we'd see bad everywhere, right? So it's very beautifully explains how if uh, soul rules, then we hear good, we see good, we talk good words, and if the ego rules, then it's the opposite of it that happens to us. So, an introspection is very, very essential. That's where the Bhagavad Gita, here, this interpretation becomes so practical for every spiritual aspirant. If you're listening to this, you are a spiritual aspirant. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be pulled to listening to this. So if you are an aspirant, every night before sleeping, you can ask yourself, like, in which places my soul ruled, in which places the ego ruled. So if you ended up speaking harsh words or thinking harsh thoughts about someone, there the ego was ruling. Or if you were kind, or you were understanding, or you were happy because you were saying good everywhere. So there the soul has ruled. Then the verse 2. In the verse 2, Sanjay is saying that King Duryodhana is representing the material desire, who is the royal offspring of the blind sense mind. After seeing the armies of the Pandavas are representing the discriminative qualities inside of us. They are arrayed for the psychological battle. There's a psychological battle going on inside of us. So he talks with his perceptor, Drona. So Drona is representing the past sanskaras. So there could have been good deeds that we did, and there could have been the bad deeds that we did, and all of those are within us in the form of sanskaras, or the impressions which have been left by past thoughts and action, which create a strong urge for repetition. So here you see that Duryodhana, representing material desire, he will confer with Drona. So Drona, the past life sanskaras can either go on the side of the good inside of us, and they can also go in the side of the bad inside of us. So we were on verse 2. We just completed verse 2. And now we move to verse 3. In the verse 3, Duryodhana is talking to Drona. He's addressing Drona, and he's saying to him that, O teacher, behold these great armies of sons of Pandu, which are the discriminative forces entrenched in the spinal center. So here he is showing those forces of Pandu. The forces of Pandu are, again, like we said before, that the battle between soul and the ego is taking place inside of us. And in this battlefield, now Duryodhana, who is representing the sense, the material desire, is conferring with Drona, who is representing the past life impressions of the good and the bad deed inside of us. And he is showing that look at the forces of the Pandavas arrayed. So, what happens when the desire for walking the path of the soul, it awakens inside a devotee, inside a spiritual aspirant, like we are all spiritual aspirants. So when the positive forces awaken inside of us, so the material desire, it becomes alarmed, and it it wants to look at his or rouse his own forces, that how can I keep following the sense path. So one I feel one observes that one, when maybe one starts meditating or doing something which is towards aligned towards the soul path, a resistance might come up. So the resistance that comes up is, you can imagine it as Duryodhana talking to Drona and showing him his sense army. The resistance would be the battle of Kurukshetra taking place inside. So he is showing, so these discriminative qualities, this discriminative forces are entrenched in the spinal centers, as we will see later. So he says in the verse 3, he says, they are they are led by your talented disciple, the son of Drupad. So it is so interesting that Drona, he's talking to Drona, and Drona is representing the past life impressions which are coming from the good and the bad deeds from the past lives. So it can also lead to the son of Drupad, who is the disciple of Drona again. So something which is coming from our past life, which is representing the calm inner life, light of intuitive awakening. So even if we are, listening to this, if we are interested in this, it's very much possible that, something like the son of Drupad, who is representing this intuitive awakening inside, which knows that there is something more, has awakened inside of us. And there is this, the material desire who is looking at this battlefield and seeing that, look, the intuitive awakening has it has begun inside, and we need to do something about it. So when you start following this path of meditation or of wisdom or following the soul path, the resistance does come up, but one has to know that there are forces which are so powerful and which are coming from not just this life, from many lives before, what all we have done. And there have to be like good deeds if we are interested or inclined towards it. So one can take heart and know that those forces are aligned there to help us. And the verses 4 to 6 are actually about those. So it actually tells us that what are those forces inside of us which are aligned to help us. So it's so good to know that there is enormous help for us also. So the verse 4 to 6 now, Duryodhana is describing that which are the Pandava heroes who are in the battlefield. So here we can look at it and know that these are the forces there to help us. So he says the present are mighty heroes, extraordinary bowmen, as skillful in battle as Bhima and Arjuna. So he first names Bhima and Arjuna. So every, like, it's so enchanting and fabulous how Yoganandaji describes it, that every name is representing something. So here when he says Arjuna, Arjuna is representing self-control. And also each of the Pandavas, like all of us who are familiar with the chakras, the energy centers, so each of the Pandavas is also, representing one of the mastery over one of the centers. Like if we begin from the first one, so that Sahadeva, who represents restraint, is connected to the root chakra, right? So restraint is so important as a quality, and it is present inside of us. Second is Nakula. Nakula is representing the second center, the sacral center, and the quality that he represents is adherence. And adherence is adherence to the good rules. There are some rules which are good, and we have the capacity to adhere to them, which is represented by this the second part of Nakula. Like it could be even, like it could be meditating, it could be waking up early, it could be following healthy practices, taking care of your health. So that's represented by Nakula. The third is third center, the center of fire, that is represented by Arjuna, and Arjuna is representing the quality of self-control. Okay. And the fourth is Bhima, fourth center, the heart center, represented by Bhima, who's representing life control. So life control is, so we are energy beings and there is prana inside of us. And Yoganandaji explains it in quite some detail when he shares that uh, it's also when we want to gain the mastery over our senses. So with the meditative practices, we can divert the flow of the prana from the senses to the higher centers. So the ability to do this is comes from Bhima. So this quality is present inside of all of us. And as we develop this intention, we would be able to master our senses more and more. So here it's like we have to take heart and know that there are so much inside of us which is supporting us when we start following the path of the soul. Like we cannot fail. The fifth center, the throat chakra is represented by Yudhishthira, who is representing divine calmness. Okay. And then he goes on to describe the other warrior. He says the veteran warriors like Yudhana. Yudhana is representing divine devotion. Again, that quality is present inside of us. Virata, representing samadhi, the ability to go into samadhi. Drupad is representing extreme dispassion. Like I could see that as that this is okay and that's also okay. Like that quality of having extreme dispassion. And he says, powerful drishtaketu, the power of mental resistance. So it could be like the in the mind, maybe something comes which is like a lower desire, and the ability to resist it. That is represented by drishtaketu. Then Chekitana is representing spiritual memory. The like can be to me it is like we remember what it is like to be in the soul state, to be in touch with divine. All of that, the Chekitana is present inside of us. Kashi Raja representing discriminative intelligence. Purujit representing mental interiorization. It means to conquer the many astral powers which are ruling over the senses. Like we said, the prana goes into the senses, and when we can conquer that, that quality is represented by Puruji. Kunti Bhoja is the right posture, like, like the straight spine, like when one sits in meditation, for example, or also how one carries oneself, the right posture also matters. Shevya, it representing power of mental adherence. Again, like being able to, if there is a something which is good for us, are we able to do that? Then there is Yudhmanya, which is life force control. Utimayus, which is vital celibacy. We can always choose to direct our energies into the higher centers, or they can stay among the lower centers, and that's represented by the vital celibacy. Then there is Abhimanyu, which represents self mastery, and the sons of Draupadi, which are characteristics of the five awakened spinal centers. So, in this verses 4 to 6, Duryodhana has counted and recounted what are the forces of the Pandavas which are arrayed inside when a devotee awakens. And all of these forces are there to support the devotee in the path of the soul. Ultimately, always the soul will win. Like in the battle also happened that Pandavas win in the end. It's just a matter of time when that happens. But always the Pandavas will be more powerful. Right? And then in verse 7 to 8, Duryodhana goes on to recount the forces of the Kauravas. Now he is in a bit of a trepidation that, okay, these are so many powerful forces here. So he says in verse 7, O learned one, it addresses Drona again. Listen about the generals of my army, and I, Duryodhana, will share that now. In verse 7, he says, now I will share the generals of my army. What are the forces in the sense army, which which create the battle inside? So that happens in the verse 8. We see them. So one is, of course, is Drona. So Drona would, of course, as we went into earlier, represents the impressions from the good and the bad deeds of the past lives. And they can side with both the sides they can side. So even if when we have, the negative karma from the past lives, those impressions are there. They are like seeds inside of us, and they also create a resistance when we try to go into the soul path. So he says Bhishma. So Bhishma is the inner seeing ego, which is like, connected to the body, connected to the identity of I, rather than being connected to the soul or divine. That's what is Bhishma. Bhishma is powerful. Then Karna, which is representing attachment. So one is that one can have discrimination and see that this is the good thing to do. Or otherwise, what happens is that one can have a reason in one's own mind that this seems to be the good thing to do, and then create an excuse to do which is not actually the right path, but follow that. Like that happens in the Kurukshetra battle also, that Karna could have sided with the Pandavas, which are the good forces, but he sides with Duryodhana. And he gives himself the reason that Duryodhana is my good friend. I have my loyalty to him. But his actual reason was that he was actually very angry, and he was operating from ego, and he was operating from those negative emotions because Kunti had given up Karna because she was an unwed mother, and she had sired him with, by praying to Surya. So actually, he was operating from that. So when we operate from attachment, to like some anger, we are operating from anger, for example, but we tell ourselves, no, no, I'm doing the good thing. So that quality is represented by Karna. Then there is kripa. Kripa is that individual delusion. Like if I believe like I'm just this body and I have this separate identity, whereas the truth is that we are souls and we're always connected to the divine. So this delusion, in some aspect, it is essential to have some of this delusion because um, everything will dissolve into nothingness if I let go of my identity of the I. But it also becomes like a barrier in our path. If we are too identified with ourselves, it just becomes about me and what I need and what is good for me. Right. So the Yoganandaji also mentions that after the battle is over and the Kauravas are lost, Kripa is one of those who like survives and like he goes on to live his own life. And that in itself tells us that some individual delusion is essential, but it has to align with the good forces. So we have to have that individual identity, but it should not become a barrier in the soul path. Then the Ashwathama, which is the latent desire. So many, it's like that becomes like a block in our path when we have something which is like we want to do and it is hidden inside of us. The desire seeds, it goes on producing karma. And one is the karma which we could have from the past lives. But even in the present life, we keep on producing karma when we operate from actions which are ego oriented and ego centered, and from these desires within of us, which are coming from the place of ego. Then there is vikarna. Vikarna is repulsion. So as we are drawn to some things, we might be repelled from some things which are otherwise good for us. So that aspect is called vikarna, and that is also present inside of us. It's important to recognize it. We might be like, okay, I do not want to eat the healthy food or do not want to follow the healthy practices, even though they are good for us. So that is the vikarna talking inside of us. Then there are the sons of Somidatta, which is Bhruvishravas, which is the karma or material action, which keeps us tied into this plane. So every karma has, it produces an attachment inside of us when we operate from that sense of I, and, and from our ego desire, and then it creates a shackle for us. And then there is the Jayatrat, which is representing body attachment. That's also very difficult to let go of, that I am this body. So all of these forces are, they are arrayed to kind of like fight the Pandava forces, the good forces, the forces of the soul. And um, uh, this is the battlefield, the battle of Kurukshetra, that happens inside of us every day. And I feel the every spiritual aspirant, we can like feel good about it, that the good forces will always win. And the negative forces will be defeated in times. And as we are able to see that, we are able to see that body identification inside of us, or us operating from any ego desire, we can really tell ourselves and we can stop ourselves, and we can maybe not follow through with the action at certain times, or be observant of the thoughts, and give a different thought to ourselves, or go into meditation and go into peace of mind, so that we know that the thoughts which are disturbing us, they can calm down with that meditation. So when we touch into that deep peace inside the meditation, we are touching the divine forces, the divine, the the how we are the soul, our soul identity inside of us in that peace. So hope you liked it, and hope you gain many understanding for it. For the details, you can look at other YouTube channels where of the other videos that I have posted on the details of every verses. If you want to go into, you can read the book to go into the all the detail. It is God Talks to Arjuna, the interpretation of Bhagavad Gita by Yoganandaji. So thank you, friends, for listening.